Welcome to InterPartyConflict, the podcast where we answer your questions so you can have the best tabletop gaming experience possible. My name's Gabe.
And my name is Jeff.
And we're going to answer your questions today. But first, I have a question, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
How are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. I'm actually getting into a different type of tabletop gaming.
Ooh.
Warhammer 40K.
Yeah.
But a buddy of ours, Dave, got me a starter kit for Christmas because a friend of his got him into it, and so now he has to get as many people into it so he has more people to play with.
Sure. I know what that's like.
I think I've mentioned this before, but I actually kind of enjoy it, and I'm getting really well. I haven't quite started yet, but I have been doing a lot of research and shopping as far as like the miniature painting. So I'm gonna get into that pretty soon, and I don't know, maybe I'll have something. I'll post like pictures or something if I could find a nice way to like take pictures of them.
Sure.
And I failed photography class, not because I was bad at photography, but because I was a bad student. But anyway. Doing okay. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good myself. I asked for a miniature painting kit for Christmas, so nice. I got one, and then my brother-in-law gave it to me, and he plays Warhammer or played Warhammer, so he also gave me a package of some of his like Space Marines or whatever, and some paints of his in addition to the kit that he bought me.
Actually, Gabe, you have Eldar. They're space elves. I'm sorry, I really don't know much about Warhammer.
All right, thanks guys for listening. Check us out on
at actually.com. I wonder if that's a website.
It probably is.
Yeah, I think there was like a skit on some television show or something where it was a game show called Actually, the game show where nerds correct other nerds.
There you go. So aside from that, just been doing pretty good. Been trying to get stuff done at home. Doing stuff at work. I'm getting ready to move over to a different. My work is moving me to a different location in a couple weeks.
Oh, sure. Yeah, a little bit more of a commute, but
a little bit more. Yeah, and I'm probably going to be working a different job, which it's fine. But I get to keep my job, so I'll take it. Anyway, aside from painting miniatures, just same old. Trying to do stuff for the podcast, do stuff at home, do stuff at work.
Cool.
You want to go ahead and get into the episode?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay. All right, Jeff. So you are in a dungeon that is controlled by the goddess of the luck dragon. There's a luck dragon.
Sure.
And because of that, every time you open a door in this dungeon, it's the room behind it is randomly generated.
Oh. Sometimes
there is treasure. Sometimes there is not treasure. So I want you to take that D100 right there.
Okay.
And I want you to roll that, and whatever answer it lands on will determine whether it is treasure or a trap.
Okay. This thing just looks like a golf ball.
Yes.
All right, here we go.
Don't worry, it'll
settle.
Okay. Tell you what, Jeff.
Yeah.
You found the dragon's hoard.
Yay! Oh, I fell off the table. I have to re-roll.
Please no.
Okay.
All right. So our item for today was submitted by Damien from Adventures in Aurelia. He was on our podcast just a few weeks ago. He sent us in this item. This item is called Bloodthorn Powder.
Ooh.
After ingesting this powder, the creature gains a +1 to their strength score and a -1 to their wisdom score for the next 8 hours. During this time, the creature does not get tired, does not need to sleep, and does not suffer the effects of exhaustion.
Ooh.
That's pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
However, also, this effect can be applied every 8 hours, extending the duration and increasing the powder's effect. Once the creature allows the effect to end, however, it must make a Constitution saving throw DC 11 plus the number of days awake. If the creature fails this saving throw, they immediately fall under the effects of the avoided exhaustion.
Yeesh.
So what that means is that you can use this item to, stay awake several days, not suffer exhaustion, whatever. However, at the end of that time, if you fail the save, you are then potentially suffering several days worth of exhaustion.
Yeah.
Which is a big deal.
Right.
In 5th edition, I want to say it's like 5 levels of exhaustion and you're dead.
Okay.
I mean, takes a long time to get to that point, but yeah.
That's really cool though. It's like, because you can just kind of keep going for a while and keep on going and going and going, and maybe you'll drop dead suddenly.
Maybe. Hey, you'll never drop dead as long as you keep taking it.
So if you never run out, oh my gosh, that's really cool. So you can like you have to like keep a big stock of it,
and then after a certain point, like you can't stop because you've been awake for so long. The save DC would be so high.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's really cool.
Yeah. I think that's a neat item, and this is a first for a couple of things for the Dragon Sword. I don't think we've ever had a Dragon Sword item that was like a potion or like a consumable, have we?
Sure, yeah. I don't think so.
Also, you could very easily consider this a drug.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's take this moment to tell all of our listeners, hey, let's get real for a moment.
let's get real.
In this bottle, I have some crack cocaine. No, I don't. Okay. I don't actually have some. I was referring to a commercial with Paul Rubens, aka Pee Wee Herman. So yeah.
Don't do drugs, kids.
Don't do drugs. They're just bad.
Everything in moderation, and only if it's legal. And
let me put it this way: you can take so much caffeine that you die.
Yeah,
that is a real thing.
Sure,
and caffeine is 100% legal.
Yeah.
So yes, as you said, everything in moderation.
Everything in moderation, and stay in school.
I mean, unless you're already out of school, in which case you probably shouldn't stay in the school.
Don't be a fool. Stay in school. Wait, no.
Don't be silly. Say no to drugs from Billy.
Give a garbage, throw at your garbage.
Don't eat bugs, and also don't do drugs.
Okay. All right. Yeah, bugs have feelings too. Drugs are bad.
Here's one. If Rey is your favorite Star Wars heroine, don't do heroin. Also, if she's not your favorite heroine, still don't do heroin. If you went to high school with a girl named Beth, you probably shouldn't do meth.
Do you know how many Beths are out there?
I mean, hopefully a lot. Hopefully everybody can take that advice. Call your mom once in a while, and don't do crocodile.
Whoa, what's crocodile? That sounds pretty good.
It's some like homemade drug from Ukraine or something that is so nasty that like you inject it into your arm, and like there's pictures of people's arms that are like all rotted away or something.
Ooh.
I don't know why it's called crocodile. Maybe it does make you scaly.
It makes your skin all scaly. And
all I know is that it's a very, very Eastern European poor person drug.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yikes.
So I think that'll do it for the drug talk.
Drug talk, yeah.
The more you know.
No, but for real, be very careful anytime you use drugs, even if it's prescription or legal.
Yes, absolutely.
This is a message from your uncle Gabe and Jeff.
Your one uncle that is both Gabe and Jeff.
Yes, it is his one man named Gabe and Jeff.
Here's the spoiler, everybody. Jeff and I are not two separate people. I'm just one person sitting in a room by myself with a tape recorder. I'm doing all the voices in my head.
Yeah.
Maybe you're in my head, listener. Maybe.
Okay.
So yeah, real talk, people. Exhaustion in D&D is no joke.
Yeah.
You can die. So don't take too much Bloodthorn powder. I don't care if they said the first dose is free.
Right, yeah.
Just even if you just need it to like pass that exam or whatever. You want to go ahead and get into the episode, Jeff?
Okay, let's get
into the questions. I mean,
oh yeah, sure.
Okay, all right. So that'll about do it for the Dragon's Horde. If anybody wanted to submit items for the Dragon's Horde, questions for us to discuss, or stories for the funeral pyre, how would they do so?
They can send us an email at interpartyconflict@gmail.com.
Yes, and also I want to remind everybody. Last week we started our Patreon. Yes. So head over to patreon.com/InterPartyConflict. See if any of the rewards look good for you. We're going to be coming out with additional content for our patrons, and it's great. So go check that out.
Yes, please.
Cool. All right. Oh, and be sure to check out critacademy.com.
Yes.
Guys over there, they're making great podcasts. Also, D&D Character Lab, also making a great podcast. So we got a great Crit Nation fellowship here.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, our first question comes from 17 North on Reddit, and they ask, with the huge amount of systems, settings, and styles of tabletop RPGs out there, why is D&D still the most well-known go-to system? Does it come down to marketing dollars, or is D&D just that good?
Now, I'm going to put a disclaimer here right at the beginning. I love D&D.
Yeah.
It is my favorite game.
Sure.
Just getting that out there.
Okay.
Because I might say some things that, had I not said that, people might misconstrue.
All right, D&D, turn this off, D&D.
Sure.
Just mute
Well,
it.
I was just going to say, like, D&D does a lot of things. I think that is definitely worthy of being very, very popular. However, I would say D&D probably is not the best at anything that it does.
Sure.
I mean, I haven't played a ton of RPGs, but just what I know of the different styles of RPGs that are out there. Everything that you can do in D&D, like, I'm pretty sure you can do better from, like, I've heard from other people who have played a lot of, like, indie games, a lot of other games that are not as popular as D&D. And it seems like all of the things that people praise D&D for, like, there are games that do exactly that as good as possible.
Yeah. But I guess in those cases, like, more than likely they're going to be more focused on that one mechanic or something.
Absolutely.
Because I think you've said it in a previous episode that D&D is like tries to do everything. It tries to give rules to everything,
right?
Which makes it complicated, but also kind of limiting in some ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, absolutely. There, because like anytime I see like a cool like indie game or something, like I'll read up on it, and it's just like, oh, that's like it'll be like a specific mechanic that like kind of makes the game, and it's like that's a really cool way to do that, you know.
Yeah.
But like it's like you always wish you could do stuff like that in D&D, and then like they'll try to do something like that with some like with supplemental books and things like that. Like they'll add mechanics to like different classes and things like that. Like, or there's like a whole book about like skill
checks or skill challenges.
Skill challenges, yeah, stuff like that. So, but it's difficult to give balanced rules to as many situations as possible. Things are going to get a little, I don't know. I feel like things get restrictive after a while.
Yeah.
The more you add to a rule system, the more restrictive the rules get, because you have to keep everything in line and balanced.
Like I'll in a minute, I'll even give like sort of a little brief history of like a lot of what D&D does, and I guess how it became, how I believe it came to be popular. But to explain sort of what I was saying just a minute ago, like I feel like other games do some things better than D&D. I very recently, like within the last 24 hours, got into an argument with somebody on Facebook, as I am wont to do. And it was because somebody on Facebook, in reply to something, they were complaining about players not role playing, and the statement that this person said was, D&D isn't a combat game. And my response was, I mean, it is. It really kind of is.
Yeah.
Like, yes, you can role play in D&D, but think about D&D. D&D started as a war game. If you look back at the first couple editions of D&D, it was all dungeon crawls. It was all killing monsters to get experience so you can level up, so you can kill more powerful monsters. Like, yes, I know that it is the cool thing to talk about how role-playing is the whole reason to play D&D, or how role-playing is the best way to play D&D or whatever. But if you just take the player's handbook, if you had no idea what D&D was, someone handed you the player's handbook and they said, find out what this game is about, there's got to be 90% of that book is combat rules.
Right. It's all numbers and like, combat.
Yeah. Like if you look at your character sheet, there isn't a 2-inch by 2-inch square on that sheet that doesn't have some sort of combat information in it.
Yeah, something that at least can be used in combat.
Yeah, like you've got, your character name and your alignment and all that at the top. You've got, like, with 5th edition, you've got your like your personality traits and stuff in the upper right corner, but the rest of it is almost entirely here's how accurate you are when you hit. Here's how much damage you can take. Here's your skills that you could. Here's sneak. Here's intimidate. I mean, yeah, I guess like those can have out of combat applications.
Yeah.
But the book spends so much more time telling you how to fight in combat.
Yeah.
Than it does telling you how to role play. I can't even off the top of my head think of anything in any of the core books that is like, here is how you role play.
I feel like, I mean, I know in like the races section and like the first paragraph of every class description, there's like a little bit of like sort of lore, and then they'll make like the example characters and then kind of give like a little backstory to them too. Mm-hmm. 5th edition, I know has done better for that, at least with like the background stuff. I feel like
definitely 5th edition is, I would say, the best edition so far.
Yeah.
Of D&D that does that. Yeah.
Yeah. So like with because it gives you like all these little things to choose from or roll for, and like it just kind of gives you an idea. An idea of how you could play your character. You know, obviously I don't have to follow it exactly to the book, but
right.
It at least like gives you like a skeleton to build your characters, like your role playing side of your character. Mm-hmm. And then I think in the Xanathar guide, there's even some extended stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like there's ways to like roll background, like more like your history of your character. I think you can roll for.
Sure.
So it's like, your parents died. You roll a dice. Okay, your parents are dead. Why did they die? You roll a dice. Fire. Okay,
right.
Roll
right.
a dice. What caused the fire? It was a dragon. Okay, your parents were killed by a dragon. Cool. You get to and then you get to throw that into your character when you're playing the game. So yeah, they're definitely doing better, making it. They're doing a better job making it look like a role playing game rather than just fighting.
Right.
So,
and I'm not trying to say that D&D is a combat game. I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't be role playing or whatever. Like, and I try to make it clear in my Facebook argument, like you can play the game however you want. Mm-hmm. You can, a lot of people role play. I love to role play in D&D.
Yeah.
I might even say that I wouldn't say it's my favorite part. I actually personally like exploration more than I like role playing, but role playing is a great part of D&D. You can do so well. The game is so much fun when people are role playing. Mm-hmm. But you can say lots of things D&D is. You can't really say a lot of things D&D isn't.
Sure.
You most definitely, if there's anything you cannot say D&D is not.
Right.
You cannot say D&D is not a combat game. What would you base such a statement on?
Sure.
Like, the fact that so much of the rules are about combat, whether you consider it a combat game or not, you can't blame someone for thinking it is after looking at the player's handbook and being like, oh, this is all combat rules. The number one criticism I have seen people make about D&D, people that don't play D&D but play other role-playing games, the number one criticism is that D&D is too combat focused. And I mean, whether you think it's too combat focused or not, you can't disagree that it's not combat focused.
Right.
There is, like, I can't even accurately describe D&D to someone without bringing up combat. I've tried, and then we're like, okay, cool, let's make a character. And then I could be like, you start with this weapon, and then here's your bonus to hit, and then this armor makes you harder to hit in combat, and
yeah. I mean, D&D is a game where you play adventurers.
Sure.
Like you play adventurers in a fantasy setting where there are monsters.
Yeah.
So I mean, like in the real world, there are monstrous people, people who don't act very nice.
I guess people that try to sell you drugs.
Oh yeah,
drugs are bad.
Drugs are bad. but I mean, like in the D&D world, not only are there bad people, there are bad orcs, bad goblins, bad dragons, bad Githyanki.
Yeah, sure.
There's so many more different factions of things that want to hurt other things.
Right.
So like there's always going to be conflict. And like the whole idea is like you're going on adventures and you're going through this world where like there's bound to be conflict around every corner.
And not just InterPartyConflict.
Thank you. Yeah, but it's like it's going to be combat centric. Like at the very least, you're going to have to deal with, like, you're going to have to deal with violence in some way.
Sure.
So there's going to have to be rules for that violence.
And I mean, you can run a game of D&D that doesn't have any combat in it. Mm-hmm. That's definitely possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the rules aren't really going to be helping you out in that regard. You can use it for whatever you want, but again, just based off of what the developers of the game chose to spend their word count on. If you were using that as a basis for what type of game D&D is, you would have to at least consider it partially a combat game.
Yeah. The only reason I can think somebody make the argument that it's not a combat game is that they have a very specific definition of a combat game, which probably boils down to they have a favorite combat game and it's nothing like D&D.
Sure, that works.
That's, I mean, like it's like when it's like it's not a combat game because it's not like the game that I consider a combat game, even though they both have combat in them. But whatever.
Right. So getting back to the question. There's a lot of games out there. A lot of games that I think the point I was trying to make is that, like, there are other games that do the things that D&D does better. There are probably games that do combat better, probably. There are almost definitely games that do role-playing better. We had a whole episode about, like, narrative-focused games versus genre simulation games. So, like, there are games that are much more narrative-focused, much more role-playing focused than D&D. So, with those, why is D&D... like what people think of when they think of a tabletop RPG.
Mm-hmm.
I guess let's think back to when D&D first came about.
Sure.
D&D, I mentioned earlier, D&D started as a war game. Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, I think, were the two of them. They created the game Chainmail. And according to Wikipedia, the first edition of D&D expected you to have a copy of Chainmail in order to play it.
Oh, wow.
Like before it was Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, like there were in the stat blocks, it'd be like, oh, refer to blah, blah, blah for the magic items or whatever in Chainmail.
Huh.
And so it started out and wargaming was a big thing, but then D&D was more than just a war game. They did introduce characters and like you weren't controlling an army, you were controlling like specific people. And I would wager a guess that marketing played a big deal in it then, making it so that people knew what D&D was. Now, another big part of this is controversy. D&D in its early days was no stranger to controversy. About 2 years ago, I did a presentation at the local library about Dungeons & Dragons, like how to be a good D&D player and so on. And I did give a little rundown of the history of D&D back then. When the game started, it was right around the time when the whole satanic panic thing was going on, where like everybody thought that everything was trying to entice kids to go to the devil or whatever.
Sure.
And D&D played a big part in this, thanks to a man by the name of James Dallas Egbert III. Now, his whole thing was that he was a very depressed individual. Mm-hmm. He tried to commit suicide a few times. He eventually did kill himself, but the first time that he tried it, he was going to college. He left his college dorm, went into these, he hid in these steam tunnels, tried to kill himself there. But when he woke up and he was still alive, he went into hiding for a while. And so while he was missing, his mother hired a private investigator to look into his life, try and find out what happened to him. I think maybe even after he died, whatever the case, the private investigator found out stuff about him, and he brought all these details to his mother saying that, okay, he did this, he played this game called Dungeons & Dragons. And then his mother, I guess understandably, because she was distraught over her son either being missing or dead. I don't recall exactly where in the timeline this happened, but she heard that this game that she knows nothing about was something that her son was passionate about. And maybe once she looked into what this game was, she latched onto it as, oh, that's why he committed suicide.
Right.
Because he played this game where he believed that he was this other person. And surely that's why. It's not that she was a bad mother. It's not that he was depressed and that, something that somebody else, maybe nobody was to blame.
Right. Yeah.
But she was looking for someone to blame.
Right.
Again, understandably, everybody acts different ways when they're distraught, when something horrible happens.
Right.
So she started this huge campaign trying to get people to think that if you play Dungeons and Dragons, you might kill yourself or whatever, or just that Dungeons and Dragons was bad.
Yeah.
There have been lots of things that sprung up because of this. Everybody, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the Chick tracts, which were these like religious pamphlets that were handed out by Jack Chick.
Oh, right.
John Chick, whoever, who would pass out these pamphlets trying to convince everybody that D&D was of the devil.
Right.
And
there's black magic in it.
Exactly.
It's of the occult.
And so also there was a movie with Tom Hanks called Mazes and Monsters.
Mm-hmm.
I watched this movie because I saw the video package at the when we lived in Tennessee. I saw it. They had it at the library, and it looked like a big era Tom Hanks, and I was like, oh, this looks like a cool movie, because it was like had like a picture of this creepy maze, and it was like sometimes the maze gets too real or whatever.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, this looks really cool. And no, it was just a story about Tom Hanks plays this kid who plays Dungeons and Dragons, starts thinking he is his character, and then basically goes insane about it. And so all these people that were looking for someone to blame,
right,
because of the things that nobody wants to accept about themselves, about society, all these things that everybody wants to not be real.
Yeah.
They're looking for a reason to blame somebody, and so Dungeons and Dragons was an easy scapegoat. It was this game that has demons, it has devils, it has black magic.
Ooh.
And so people who don't know that it's just a storytelling game,
right, yeah,
might think, oh, well, black magic is bad, demons are bad, therefore Dungeons and Dragons is bad.
Right. And this sort of thing continues on to this day. I mean,
it does.
Or at the very least, I mean, like there was a big thing about Harry Potter as well.
Absolutely.
The Harry Potter books. So like, even though those were obviously just fiction,
right,
they were still getting some, you know, not, you know, they weren't great at getting, I mean, obviously the books did very well, but in some circles, it was not getting good publicity because it was, you know, teaching kids black magic.
It was quote unquote witchcraft.
Witchcraft.
I found there was a blog I found a long time ago where this guy was like, well, I heard that D&D teaches you how to cast magic spells, so I bought a player's handbook and I'm doing experiments. And so he looked at like, okay, the spell fly requires you to have a bird's feather and something else. So okay, I climbed up on top of my roof, held a bird's feather in my hand. The book didn't really say what to do after that, so I jumped off and I broke my leg. And you know, it was all tongue in cheek, obviously. But
right.
And there's a photograph of him lying on the ground with his legs all in every direction. So I guess my point is that D&D was the subject of a lot of controversy back around when it started, and when there weren't very many role-playing games.
Sure.
So as some people, you know, there's a little saying that goes, all publicity is good publicity.
Sure, yeah.
So, like, if you have people on national television saying Dungeons and Dragons is bad and it is of the devil and you should not play it, more people are going to play it because they've never heard of it before.
Especially like rebellious or, or just curious children. Like, it's like, oh, like, okay, my mom and dad don't want me to do this. Well, they want me to do boring stuff like my chores. So obviously the things they don't want me to do must be great.
Right. And so having all this controversy, having all of this attention to it at a time when there weren't really any competitors,
right,
was hugely influential. And it was to the point where, again, not everybody knew what Dungeons and Dragons was, but they knew it existed. They knew the name.
Yeah, the name became sort of household because, like, whether for better or worse, but like people knew it existed.
Yeah.
So it was out there enough to where if somebody was curious enough about it, they knew where to look. If
they were at the store and they saw Dungeons and Dragons, they would be like, oh, let me see what this actually is.
Sure, yeah.
Or at the very least, it's got that brand recognition. Brand recognition is something that companies all over the world strive for with every fiber of their being. They want people to hear their name and recognize it, whether they know what their product is or not. Just knowing the name is a huge, huge thing. So, fast forward 30 years, there are a lot more role-playing games out there, a lot of which I would be willing to bet have Dungeons and Dragons to thank for making it, making gaming more mainstream.
Sure.
And so I think that's why Dungeons and Dragons is as popular as it is. I think it's because when it started, it had no competition and it very easily got a lot of attention. Negative attention being a lot of it, but it got attention.
Mm-hmm.
So nowadays, maybe a lot of the people who heard about it when they were younger, they hear about it nowadays because it's more people that played it then have been playing it for years and years. And so they've been telling people about it, and then those people have been telling people about it. So it has a bigger fan base now. So people are more likely to hear about it. And then when they do, they're like, oh, I wonder if that was actually what I thought, what everybody said it was. And then maybe they look into it, and then maybe they're like, oh, it's just a game. It's a fun little game.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Maybe I'll check this out. And so more people are getting into it. And also a lot of the types of people that played it when it was starting tended to be, I guess nerdy types. Maybe we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. But the people that played it were the types of people that went on to create content in various fields. And so nowadays, when we're in a society where people are creating content left and right, the people that created content that got popular were likely to be people that played games like Dungeons and Dragons. So it's wormed its way into all sorts of pop culture.
Yeah. So there's a boom of tabletop games.
Yeah.
Within the last, I'd say 5-10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it is all to thank to D&D basically. Like at the very least, most of them have D&D to thank. Mm-hmm. And so like in that way that like D&D is popular because there's a little bit of D&D in everything.
Right.
And when it comes to tabletop gaming, unless somebody's going for something specifically not D&D.
Right.
But there's always going to be a little bit of it there. And so it's kind of hard to get away from D&D if you're going into tabletop gaming.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff in video games that would not exist. I would say video games as we know them would not exist without D&D.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely wouldn't, because a lot of games, even non-RPG games, have RPG elements now.
Absolutely.
Leveling up and things like that, and like character stats and all that. Like, I think I can't remember. Like, I think Steve mentioned this, or maybe you had mentioned this when talking about 4th edition D&D.
Yeah.
How when 4th edition D&D first came out, I remember everyone was looking at it and being like, oh, they're making it like World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
And then but then thinking about it, it's like, well, World of Warcraft kind of has a lot to thank from things like D&D.
Yeah.
So it's like World of Warcraft wouldn't have existed without D&D.
Right.
At least not in the same time. So it's like, okay, World of Warcraft kind of built off of something that built off of something that built off of D&D.
Yeah. Why
can't D&D kind of use what they've come up with to make a game?
To be fair, they can do whatever they want. I think it's people don't like the idea of D&D being thought of as a combat game. In their head, they have the idea that being about combat is bad.
Yeah.
No. This isn't a combat game. This is a role-playing game.
There's role-playing, and then there's role-playing with
2 L's, yeah.
With 2 L's.
Play the game however you want, but I've played with enough groups to know that sometimes you get to a game and you expect to do a ton of role-playing, ROLE, and then you get there, and all they want to do, all the DM wants to do, all the players want to do, is to fight things.
Right.
That is an equally valid way to play the game. I don't know. Maybe this is a grounds for another question. But I don't know where the attitude of role playing is the best way to use D&D. I don't know where that attitude came from, but it's not that you can't make that statement accurately.
Well, I think part of it is in the way that it's perceived by in the way that it's perceived by everybody. Mm-hmm. Kind of going into why D&D is the most popular. There was a controversy, but then because it was well known enough, it slipped into pop culture and things like that. So there are plenty of shows and movies where they do make reference to Dungeons and Dragons. They might not call it specifically Dungeons and Dragons, but it's Dungeons and Dragons that they're playing.
Right.
Steve always talked about when he first got into D&D, it was because they saw an episode of Dexter's Laboratory.
Yes.
Where they were playing a game. I forget exactly what they were calling it in Dexter's Laboratory, but it was called Monsters and Mazes or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, another one of those sort of things. And they were like, "Oh, cool! We should try to play that game." And then they tried to make that game, and then realized like, "Oh, this game exists. It's called Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
Like it's okay. There's books for here. We don't have to come up with our own rules." So it appears in books and movies and stuff like that, but it only ever appears as a bunch of nerds sitting in a basement wearing cloaks and talking in, you know, accents and like playing as their character as much as possible. So like the only time you're going to see it in, you know, in media is the role playing aspect of it. Cause like it's, you know, it's not going to be, because it's usually just sort of in passing. It's like, they're you know, the little brother character plays D&D with his friends or something like that. Sure. I mean, heck, in the Stranger Things show, they're playing D&D. Although they do have some combat going in that. Like,
I mean, a little bit, yeah.
A little bit in the first season. But I mean, like for the most part, you're only ever seeing like little snippets of them role playing and pretending to be a knight or a wizard or something like that. So So I, you know, in an iconic way, it is seen as a role-playing game when in reality, it's much more combat-centric.
Yeah.
But speaking of nerds...
Yes. You want to go on to our second question?
Sure. Yeah. So speaking of nerds in basements, our next question comes from Dolly the Llama on Reddit. How do you feel about the nerdy stereotype that D&D brings with it?
I'll just say right now, I hate it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think it's stupid.
I don't mind it that much, but... I mean, I don't mind that it's seen as nerdy. I think I just mind that certain other things aren't also seen as nerdy.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly how I feel.
The stereotypical nerd, like, is just it's a cartoon character.
Yeah.
Like it's, you know,
it is a caricature in every way.
Exactly. But like being nerdy about something, like being a nerd, it's, you know, it's kind of in the same way of being like a fanatic or a fan or something like that. Like you're nerdy about something. You're not quite like, it's not quite obsession, but it's more of an academic interest or or just like or something. It's like a hobby you're really into. I'd say like hobby level is a good place.
Sure.
I mean, like, heck, you know, most D&D stuff is bought in hobby shops, you know, like you find like game stores and hobby shops. So like, so being nerdy about something, being a nerd, I think fantasy gaming, fantasy sports. Yeah. Sorry. Fantasy
sports. Yes.
Fantasy sports.
Fantasy football and all that.
Yeah. Is pretty dang nerdy.
Absolutely.
My sister and her husband are really, well, not super into it, but they're into it enough that like it comes up in conversation. Yeah. But I think it's just nerdy. Every time they bring it up, I'm like, nerds. Just like Lisa does to us whenever we're talking about D&D.
I know.
But I may have mentioned this once on the show before, but my Steve and I would play like this like in-browser fantasy game or something like that. Yeah. It was basically like you kind of like posted things to get points, and the points bought you an army or something, and then you can use the army to attack other people. It was I guess maybe like sort of like a Clash of Kings sort of thing, but it was text based and on browser. On the computer. Something like that. And we play stuff like that, and you like post things and do little this and that. And then I remember my sister came to us one day and was like, "Hey, have you checked out this website? It's called the Facebook." And we're like, "What is that?" It's like, well, you get to make a profile and you collect friends and you poke them and this and that. And then we're like, we were both like, that's the nerdiest thing we've ever heard of. Right. And then she's like, no, it's the coolest thing. And it was like, we're like, no, that reminds us of our very nerdy thing that we do. Yeah. You know, so like it's, you know, so nerd is not exclusive to things like D&D, right, or Magic the Gathering or Pokemon or video games, or, you know, especially not video games anymore. Video games is much
video
more,
games are so mainstream.
They're like, I wouldn't say to an annoying degree, but to a startling degree. Yeah, exactly. To just a very like wow, it really has sort of changed a lot.
Like Major League Gaming is like a huge thing nowadays.
Yeah, it's not it's not nearly as widely accepted as
Right.
like as a lot of things. Like I remember seeing a thing about they played like a tournament or like a match of Dota or something on ESPN like 3 or something.
Yeah.
Like one of the ESPN channels, not the ESPN channel, but like one of the extra ones they have. Whatever. Sure. I don't follow sports. And people were livid about it. Like some people were like, "Oh, this is interesting," but most of the people were like, "What is this crap doing on ESPN or whatever?" So it's like it's not quite as widely accepted as actual like sports like football and stuff.
Yeah.
But heck, football's got a lot of things going for it, like commercial wise. So like there's a lot of funding and stuff behind that. But esports are they're making their way.
Making their way up.
So,
yeah.
And I mean, tabletop gaming is on the rise. Like we said, there's been a boom in a lot of different, a lot of new systems coming out. There's like tons of new board games, card games.
And board games are getting to be so complicated, they might as well be role-playing games on their own.
True. Yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, like heck, like the Dark Souls game, like it's pretty intense.
Oh my goodness.
And like, God, that game was so ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's great though. I liked it. Mm-hmm. Oh, you can paint those miniatures now.
I could.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it. But I got to ask, like, with your example of that, they put like Dota on ESPN 3 or whatever. What is so much more nerdy or what is so less acceptable about watching a bunch of people play a game on TV that they're very good at?
Yeah.
And having an audience that cheers them on or whatever, and then they win money if they win, compared to another group of people playing a game on TV that they're very good at, that they have a big audience for, and they win a bunch of money if they win.
Right, yeah.
One of them is done on a computer, but there's so much of football that is computerized anyway.
Sure. It is the accessibility though, like because you can physically see a person on a field with a ball.
Yeah,
like you can imagine yourself in that situation a lot easier than the characters on the screen. Like Dota, like in Dota, like the characters are like maybe like an inch in diameter, and like there's so many things going off that you don't like. If you're not a pro at the game, you're not going to know everything that's going on, and it's a little confusing.
Well, then is it just that people don't understand it, and so that might be it.
Yeah, it's a lack of understanding and a lack of, and like it is the accessibility, because if you go further down to D&D where it's all in the mind, at least for the most part, other than maybe like miniatures and stuff like that.
Right.
Like it's hard to get a group of people to watch some people play D&D. Now, I mean, something like things like Harmon Quest have been, I mean, at least among the people I know, which are mostly people who are considered nerds, it seems to be pretty well received.
I mean, like it's all celebrities, it's all comedians.
Yeah.
Doing comedy stuff.
So, but it's also edited and animated.
Right.
And now but they're bridging that gap of accessibility that like you can't, it's not that entertaining to watch people play D&D.
Correct. I agree.
It can be.
Yeah,
it can be. Like if they're really good at role playing and stuff like that, it can be a good time. It could be a good time to watch. I've sat in on a couple sessions and it wasn't boring. But then again, I understand what's going on.
Right.
But like with something like Harmon Quest, they have to bring in celebrity guests. So like, okay, there's that attention there. So like, okay, I want to see this person. I like this person and what they do. So I'll watch what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then they're also, editing it down for time, because obviously you don't want to, a D&D session is going to take several hours, whereas a Harmon Quest episode is maybe like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Can't remember. And then they're animating it, so it's a visual thing. So like, okay, you're visually stimulated because you can see the cartoon characters on the screen, and every once in a while they cut to like the actual players. Yeah, the actual players, of which are actors and comedians and such, and people who are, who work in front of a camera, or at least, write for stuff that goes on camera.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's much more, it's a lot easier for somebody to absorb that and be entertained by it, so I guess the nerdiness is seen in the fact that you don't understand it or can't perceive it as something that is interesting. Because like if I don't think something is interesting, but somebody else thinks it's really interesting,
Yeah.
I think that's what somebody would think a nerd is.
And
Like,
to an extent, I agree with you. Let me posit a scenario.
Sure.
Have you ever been to a roller derby game?
I've never been to one, but I've seen roller derby.
Do you know how roller derby works?
Yeah.
Okay.
For the most part.
Well, a lot of people don't.
Right.
If you were to watch a game of roller derby, not knowing the rules,
Right. You would think it's just a bunch of...
you would think it's just a bunch of people going in a circle. But would you say, oh, that's nerdy? I don't know. I mean, maybe not.
No, maybe not. Well,
Because I'm trying to pin down exactly what makes D&D nerdy. Is it the fact that, I don't know, that you have to use your brain a lot to play it? I mean, maybe not. I don't think, like, I'm trying to think of, like, if there were a bunch of people sitting in a circle that were collectively writing a story that they were going to publish.
yeah.
Would anybody look at that and say, oh, that's nerdy?
I guess
I mean, maybe some people, but
maybe in some case, and it depends on what they're writing about. But like, yeah, you're right. I think it's just been built in everybody's mind. Maybe like maybe it's just like because from the beginning it's been considered nerdy.
Yeah,
that's what everyone's definition of nerdy is.
So like it very well could have been similar to how D&D became popular. Maybe it's just at the beginning, this thing that was on the rise, the people that played it were the people that were into, were the nerds because they were more into like less physical media or like less physical activities.
Yeah.
They were the people that were, more into statistics and numbers. And so the people that played it at that time were nerdy. Therefore, the stereotype of it being nerdy got bigger and bigger and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So you're not nerdy because you're playing D&D. You're nerding because people perceive you as nerdy because you're the type of person who plays D&D.
Maybe. I don't know. Because I mean, like I've played with a lot of people that I would never in a million years call them nerdy.
Right.
Yet I was sitting at a D&D table with them.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Now you said a little while ago that like, depending on what the group of writers was writing about, maybe it would be nerdy. And that's a good point. Maybe it is content related, but so maybe we can agree. Maybe orcs and elves and dwarves are nerdy. Maybe. but here's my thought process then. If somebody was playing a game of D&D or D20 Modern,
sure.
Is D20 Modern considered nerdy? There aren't, I mean, as far as I know, there aren't dwarves or elves or orcs, or at least they don't have to be.
Yeah.
But it's still a bunch of people sitting around coming up with a communal story, rolling dice. Is that nerdy?
I think it's just like a...
It's still got to be nerdy, right?
I think.
Then what is it? What is it that makes it nerdy?
I think this is... Wow. I don't know if I should go this way, but I think this is like it's a stereotype.
Yeah.
And I bet it's just ingrained in us so much. It's like someone's racist grandma.
Okay.
Like we were raised to think, that the kid with glasses who's, really into his books or into playing games or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a nerd. This is a nerdy person.
And I mean, that very well may be it.
It's like we were just taught that that's what that is. That's the kind of person that is. I mean, like, and it's, people like to put labels on everybody.
Yeah.
And so like, I mean, people like to put labels on themselves. You like to have a way to define yourself as something.
Sure. Being a nerd is not a bad thing. When I said at the beginning that I hate the stereotype, I'm not saying I hate being a nerd. I love being a nerd. Sure, I'll take it. Whatever.
Right. It's more just it's more just the stereotype of D&D is for nerds or like it's like it doesn't have to be.
I remember when I first started dating my wife Lisa, I told her about D&D and she was like, "Oh, that's nerdy." And whatever. I was expecting that much. But then there was a point where her brother referred to D&D as nerdy. And he's someone who was actively playing Magic the Gathering at the time. And it's like, hold on a minute. Where does the line get drawn? And why are you on the good side of that line?
Right. It's like, wait a minute. No, it's Magic the Gathering.
Either
There's tournaments and stuff. It's serious business.
I'm going to make a bold statement. Either Magic the Gathering and D&D are both nerdy, or Magic the Gathering is the more nerdy of the two. Like if one of them is on the good side and one is on the nerdy side, Magic the Gathering is not on the good side.
No, but Gabe, it's like there's tournaments and there's like prizes and stuff.
Then get more nerds in a room and have them play D&D. Whatever. Who cares?
Maybe it's the prizes.
Maybe
it's the whole like nothing to show for it sort of thing. I guess because well,
here I'll sort of change tack a little bit here. I always think of LARPers as being even nerdier than D&D.
Sure.
Is that fair?
I mean, maybe. I feel like there's not levels of nerd. I don't know. Yeah.
Then that means I'm in the same group as LARPers. No offense to any LARPers out there. I just think you are nerdier than me.
Well, nerdier as in like more dedicated to
right. And
your hobby.
I don't think that being nerdy is bad.
It's just nerdiness is your dedication to your hobby.
I just realized I have no place to call anyone nerdy.
No,
I am currently recording a podcast about tabletop role playing games.
We could talk about the definition of nerdy. I mean, that itself is very nerdy. So it kind of works.
I don't have any place to tell someone that they are more nerdy than me.
Sure.
Unless they're doing a podcast about LARPing or whatever.
I mean,
they're doing a TED Talk about LARPing. They're the epitome of nerdiness.
Oh goodness, TED Talk about LARPing.
Yes.
It's like a TEDx or so it's not even like one of the mainstream TEDs.
Second stream TED Talk. Yeah.
Right. I mean, my sisters called me nerdy all the time.
Yeah.
My parents never called me nerdy. I called me nerdy more than my parents did, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. Like, what makes D&D nerdy other than that's what people call people that play D&D?
I think the lesson is just that, like, anything can be nerdy. I think nerdy is a descriptor of your level of devotion to a pastime or to a hobby.
Yeah.
Whether that hobby is D&D, whether that hobby is football, whether that hobby is, I don't know, stamp collecting or hiking. I think you can be a hiking nerd.
Sure.
I've never heard anybody say that, but I think that whatever criteria you're using to define whether someone is a nerd, it would apply just as much to someone who's crazy about hiking.
But Gabe, no, hikers aren't nerds. They're enthusiasts. And football people aren't nerds, they're fans,
I guess. My cousin, my cousin through my wife, we would be like out places and he would see someone wearing a jersey of someone that is on his fantasy football team, and he would tap him on the shoulder, yo man, he's on my team, he's on my fantasy football team, yeah, and they would like high five, and it's like,
what just happened?
What in the world? How is that any? What if I walked up to someone who was wearing like a shirt with a D20 on it? I was like, man, that's my favorite die. Up top. Bam. How is one of those more or less nerdy than the other? Man, I played a cleric in my last campaign. Yeah.
Because the NFL is like a multi-billion-dollar
so it's marketing.
That's got to be it.
There you go.
It's just marketing. Everything comes down to marketing.
Yeah.
Like Google knows all of our information. They're not. Yeah. I mean, but the worst they're doing with it, at least right now, is just selling it to marketers.
Yeah.
Like everything comes down to.
This isn't quite within the scope of the question, because really the question is just how do you feel about it?
Oh.
We've gone far beyond that, but
I think the length of our answer is the answer.
Good job,
Jeff.
This
is how we feel about it.
Good job, Jeff. What I was going to say is just that, how do you think the nerdy stereotype will be in another 30 years? Do you think D&D will be nerdy in 30 years?
I think so.
You think so?
I think because it's so undefinable as what is a nerd and what is not a nerd beyond D&D and things like it.
Yeah.
I think it's Like,
because like someday, this is probably a very, very, very far off dream, but someday there will not be racist grandmas anymore.
sure.
My hope is that also, although of course on a much less serious note, I hope that there will someday no longer be people that consider D&D nerdy. I mean, then what are they going to consider nerdy? Something's got to be nerdy.
Well, I mean, being nerdy is not to everybody, but it's become more of like a sense of pride sort of thing. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm nerdy. Like, I am nerdy, to the point where there are some people who like say that they're nerdy, but don't necessarily do nerdy
OMG,
things.
I'm such a nerd. LOL.
Exactly. So, but I mean, like, but that's, that's kind of the thing about being nerdy. It's like, you're just.
So do you think that there will always be people will always call themselves nerdy, even when D&D has come and gone, there will still be nerdy?
I think so. I think there would still be somebody, something that's related to D&D.
Yeah.
Will always be around, and they'll be nerdy, or like things will be nerdy.
I haven't heard that name in 30 years since the Nerd Wars of 2086.
The great
Lost a lot of good party members in that war.
There's a lot of conflict.
Yes. All right. I think we've done a satisfactory answer for this. As you put it, I think you put it better than I could.
Yes.
All right. Well, then let's take a deep breath. Mm-hmm. Let's remember the party members lost in the Nerd Wars of 2085 or whatever I said.
In the great nerdening.
The great nerdening. So let's sit back. Let's relax. Let's toss another log onto the funeral pyre. We got a real short one for you guys today. This was submitted by Eli on Facebook. And it says simply, first level wild magic, fireball level 4.
Very good.
Anybody who has played a wild mage knows what that's about.
Oh my goodness.
So let's, should I describe what that means or just?
No, just.
Okay. So let's raise a glass in memory of the unnamed wild mage who, I don't know.
Cast a spell.
Cast a spell. Exactly. All right. Clink. All right. To submit questions for us to discuss, items for the Dragon's Hoard, or stories for the funeral pyre, please email us at interpartyconflict@gmail.com. For show notes, a running list of questions asked, and important links, go to interpartyconflict.com. Find us on Facebook, facebook.com/interpartyconflict, or our subreddit at reddit.com/r/interpartyconflict, where I post weekly discussion questions for you. We're also on Twitter at InPartyConflict. We're on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, YouTube, anywhere you download podcasts. Please rate, review, subscribe, or just tell a friend. We already talked about our Patreon, so please go to patreon.com/interpartyconflict. Mm-hmm. If you can spare even $1 a month, let us know, give it to us, and we will give you content in return. We want to come out with better content that you guys want. So if you have any ideas for possible Patreon rewards, let us know. Jeff, you want to tell us about FriendQuest?
FriendQuest is our channel on YouTube where we play video games. We have a couple ones coming up for Friday the 13th.
Cool. Awesome. Is there a Friday the 13th coming up soon? Probably not.
I think one passed recently. I'm thinking about it.
We just missed. We got to go back and now we got to build a time machine. Patreon, if you give us enough Patreon dollars, we will build a time machine and go back to the last Friday the 13th. No, we're not going to do that. We would use it for something much better, like investing in Bitcoin or something. Anyway, is that all you had?
Yeah.
Okay. And our music is made by Boxcat Games from Nameless the Hackers RPG. So, Jeff, until next time.
Hold on.
It's still rolling.
18.
Oh, you actually didn't find the Dragon's Hoard.
Oh, man.
All right.
Bye.